A book not found in any standard canon, a manuscript lost to history until its resurfacing in a remote desert cave. A text that chronicles angels cast from heaven, giants roaming the earth, and visions of an apocalypse that blurs the line between myth and prophecy. Time to decipher the Book of Enoch, here on Things Visible and Invisible. Dr. Kenneth L. Hanson is an academic, an author, and a founder of Treasures in Time, an organization devoted to disseminating knowledge of the biblical and classical worlds. An convert to Judaism, he is associate professor in the University of Central Florida's Judaic Studies program, and an author of many books on such subjects as the Dead Sea Scrolls, Kabbalah, and the lost books of the Bible. And he joins me down the line from his home in Florida. Ken, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Good to be with you, Sean, and warm shalom from the University of Central Florida Judaic Studies program.
Fantastic. Now, I'm not sure if this is part of your Judaic studies, because we're going to discuss the Book of Enoch. Something which you've written about and given many talks on. My understanding, Ken, is that the Book of Enoch sits in a kind of nether region. It's not fully accepted by Christianity, and it's not fully accepted by Judaism. Is that accurate?
Right, you are. It is in kind of a netherworld, but it is very much a part of the ancient Jewish world. And that means it's something that we study intensely as Jewish scholars, something we cover in our own academic program. Some people call it the Bible's cosmic stepchild, and I think that's a pretty good description. Basically, we have a verse or two in the biblical book of Genesis that is part of the canonical Bible that talks about some very peculiar events way back in the beginning. It says that when humankind began to increase on the earth, when daughters were born to them, which speaking now from Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 to 4, it says that certain males among the divine beings saw how pleasing human women were, and they took wives from among those daughters of men who delighted them, and sons were born to them. And for this reason, we've got a whole series of divine beings that came to be called the Nephilim, or the fallen ones. It's a very peculiar, very odd verse, but clearly the ancients believed that somehow divine beings were cohabiting with human women and spawning a race of what the Bible calls giants. There are giants referenced in the Hebrew Bible. And what do we do with them? Well, the text just goes on and kind of forgets about them. But there were a group of ancient seers, visionaries, prophets, if you will, who were so fascinated by this scant reference way back in Genesis that they began to imagine the backstory behind all of that. And there's quite a backstory. Now, how did they derive this backstory? Did they just make it all up? Did they fantasize it? Were they basically good storytellers, lying to us, telling tall tales? Well, I think that we've got really an alternate form of Judaism. You know, we think of the Judaism that's come down to us today. Go to any synagogue and you'll see that referenced very well. It's all about the Torah. It's all about Moses and the Exodus and the laws that Moses gave us. Well, here we have in the ancient world a completely alternate Judaism. We can call it Enochic Judaism, as a matter of fact. That's a formal term in scholarship because it's all over this story of Enoch that over time morphed itself into 5 distinct books of Enoch. And all of those were later compiled together as one enormous Book of Enoch. Apparently, that was their Bible. Not the Bible we know today, but Enoch was the Bible of this entire branch of Judaism. It's hard to imagine.
Now, you've set it up wonderfully, Ken. I'm in. Do you know what I mean? You've intrigued me. You've piqued my curiosity. Absolutely. But before we get into all of that, and I want to unpack some of what you've been saying, I want to situate the Book of Enoch in some kind of timeline, because most people, if we just concentrate on the Hebrew Bible, the sort of collection in the way that the Bible has been put together, certainly by the rabbis, various councils have been postulated as the time when the canonical form was set. The Hebrew Bible roughly came into shape round about what time?
We don't know. The oldest copies we have of the Hebrew Bible are from the so-called Dead Sea Scrolls, a whole library of ancient documents discovered along the shores of the Dead Sea, which is the dividing line between Israel and the Kingdom of Jordan today. It's also the lowest spot on the face of the earth. It's a story in itself. But among a series of lonely desert caves, were found scores and scores, in fact, hundreds of documents and fragments of documents, including the oldest texts of the Hebrew Bible known to exist in the world, that date to the first 2 centuries before the Common Era. Of course, even those we know were copies of copies of copies of copies. How far back did it go? That's a whole semester-long, maybe year-long course you could take at the university. You know, if you believe that Moses existed, did Moses actually write the Bible? Most scholars doubt it today. But I'm one of those few who thinks that there really was a historical Moses who left at the very least notes that were written in a sort of proto-Sinaitic script that were later compiled by subsequent editors into what we know as the books of the Torah: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. But again, that was not the Bible that this other sect knew. There's no reference to Moses' books. It's all about Enoch. And what they basically did was they flipped the book of Genesis on its head. Because if you know the story of the Bible at all, you know it's about Adam and Eve took the forbidden fruit, and she gave it to Adam, and Adam ate of it. And this was the first sin, right? It's called in theology the original sin. Well, according to the books of Enoch, no. It talks about the story, but the real sin was when these angelic beings, whom the book of Enoch calls watchers, defected. They didn't just fall from heaven, they defected from the heavenly host, and they came down to the earth lusting after these human women, and they spawned a race of giants that began multiplying, that grew to enormous height, like hundreds and hundreds of feet, and they began devouring human flesh. And in order to keep these giants from consuming all of humanity, that's why God sent the flood of Noah, to wipe out these Nephilim, as they're called, the offspring of the watchers and the human men. What a story that is. That was the original sin.
Yes, but before we get into that, and just help me out here, Ken, because
Sure.
Now we're going to deal with what we know, and I know that history is disputed sometimes, but the canonical form of the Hebrew Bible, I'm thinking of the Council of Jamnia and various other things, was set in place round about what, 400 AD, something like that?
Well, Jamnia or Yavne, as we call it in Hebrew, that council took place in the late 1st century, about 90 of the Common Era. So pretty early on, and that set in place the actual canon of the Hebrew scriptures.
So my question really then is that, because the debates at that council, from what we know, were about what would be included and what would be excluded. Now, as we know that there were a number of texts which were Greek or from the Septuagint that were excluded from the Hebrew canon, and others then were deemed to be canonical, and they remain until this day. Where does the Book of Enoch sit on that? Was the Book of Enoch around at that time? Was it in play, or was it not known?
Definitely around and definitely banned from the Bible. The rabbis and sages wanted nothing to do with that book, and yet we know it was extremely popular. Now, for the longest time, all we had were just copies of copies, in translation, mind you, that came down in the Ethiopic language, preserved way down in Ethiopia, and became part of the canon of certain Christian sects down there in Ethiopia. Also, a prominent Jewish sect in Ethiopia to this day holds the Book of Enoch as sacred. But that was just in the Ge'ez language. It was a translation. But we knew that the original had to be Semitic, had to be Hebrew or Aramaic, and we couldn't prove it. We just it sure looked like it. And but lo and behold, by golly, we have fragments of the Book of Enoch found among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the original Semitic language. And that nails it. It proves it, that it was around back then and it was extremely popular. But it was so far out there that the rabbis and the sages wanted nothing to do with it. And it was systematically excluded, banned from the Bible.
So let me just ask: in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch, it exists, and it's in Hebrew.
In the book, yeah, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Enoch is there. And they are very early copies, by the way. We had a lot of Dead Sea Scrolls spanning a couple centuries, but some of the earliest ones are Enoch.
So why was it excluded from the what has come down to us as the Hebrew Bible? What do you think was the reason or the rationale for the exclusion of the Book of Enoch?
You had warring Judaisms. Back in antiquity, there wasn't one Judaism. There were Judaisms. And this is something scholars have recognized for quite some time now. And this was from an alternate Judaism that talked about the origin of evil, not with human choice, not with Adam and Eve, but with the rebellion of these angels. And the rabbis did not want to put too much focus on angels, among other things. It's strictly monotheistic Judaism, and when you start talking about all these various beings, you run the risk that somebody might start worshiping angels instead of worshiping the single God. That's one reason, among numbers. But indeed, there is material in this book that terrified the rabbis and sages. They wanted to stay grounded. The focus of Judaism is, somebody said, it's not on the hereafter, it's on the here and now. How do we live today? What are the laws and rules by which we should live today that Moses gave us? If we live right today, then the hereafter and the heavenly realm will take care of itself.
So it was excluded for theological reasons. And sort of cast out into obscurity for many, many centuries, only existing in Ethiopia, as you say, amongst Ethiopian. There's a long-standing tradition of Jews in Ethiopia, and we know about that in modern times as well. So how did it sort of come back into modern consciousness? When did the Book of Enoch resurface as something that people started looking at, debating in modern times?
Well, I think the Dead Sea Scrolls have shined a lot of light on all these ancient texts, and to find Hebrew, Aramaic fragments of this among the scrolls has literally been a lightning rod for interest in the books of Enoch. Also, we have, as you mentioned, Seán, this sect of Jews in Ethiopia. They're called Beta Israel, and they were airlifted en masse to the state of Israel a few decades ago. And now we have all these African Ethiopian Jews in Israel. For some time, I should add, the Israeli rabbis didn't even know whether they should accept their Jewishness, because, among other things, they held to the Book of Enoch as part of the canon. But all these things, plus there is an, shall I say, increased interest in apocalyptic thought, literature, Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. And all of these trends can be traced back to this group of ancients who were looking for something out there beyond themselves. And I'm convinced going into trance-like states, even ingesting certain agents in order to induce hallucinogenic states. And that's something I think that scholarship needs to consider a lot more than it does. As scholars, we just look at texts as, there's texts and contrived fairy tales and whatnot, instead of really considering what the authors might have experienced. There was an altar, an ancient Israelite altar discovered in a city, an ancient city called Arad, out in the Negev desert. Not too long ago in the archaeology, now I have dug myself in an archaeological dig at that site, and amazingly, faint traces of cannabis, believe it or not, were discovered on that altar. And it leaves people wondering, what kind of states were these people embracing? Were the ancient high priests really getting high?
Fascinating. Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this segment already, Ken, and we've just set the groundwork on this. To give me, though, as a final question for this segment, give me an idea of when the Book of Enoch really started to grab the imagination. Was there one publication or one exposition or one academic who particularly said to people, wait a minute, we need to look at this book in light of not just Judaism, but also the history of the Bible?
Well, it's been around for a long time. It's always been there in translation. So it's one of those things that's always been studied among theologians. But I think that once Indiana Jones came along, and once we've got Dead Sea Scrolls galore out into the public, people by the millions have been, even in the cover of Life magazine and so on, you see Dead Sea Scrolls, Revelations. This sort of thing has fed the public interest. Sometimes it's pretty irresponsible because it gravitates toward anything that is weird and out there, and of course maybe aliens from some other planet wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, that sort of thing. But I don't mind it, actually, because as long as it incites a public interest in this material, then hey, it's good. And by the way, you can check out my website and learn more about this. It's called JewsGodHistory.com. Pretty simple, JewsGodHistory.com. And I have just oodles of material there for inquiring minds.
And presumably people can find out about your various publications there as well, Ken.
Absolutely. And plus I have a YouTube channel.
Which is called?
It's called Jews, God, and History as well. Or you can just Google my name and you'll get there.
Okay, for now, Ken, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.